In today's video, we're taking a deep dive into a time when rapid growth, spiritual revival, and social unrest collided. In the early to mid 1800s, America was booming. The population was soaring, the economy accelerating, and the land itself was stretching from coast to coast. But not everyone was cheering. Beneath the surface of expansion and prosperity, many Americans saw the cracks in morality, in equality, and injustice. This concern gave rise to one of the most impactful eras in American history, the Age of Reform. In today's video, we'll explore what caused this reform movement, the visionary communities that dreamed of utopia, and the powerful campaigns for temperance, abolition, and women's rights. Let's get started. In the mid 19th century, the United States was changing fast. The country was growing not just in land, but in population and economic complexity. The market revolution transformed how people worked, traveled, and connected. Cities sprouted seemingly overnight. Goods moved faster. People moved farther. But with all that change came anxiety. The causes of the reform era were numerous. Democratic ideals and individualism, born out of the American Revolution and the Enlightenment, encouraged people to question injustice and push for improvement. The Second Great Awakening, a powerful wave of religious revivalism, inspired believers not to just save their souls, but to reshape society. There was also a reaction against Enlightenment rationalism, a growing feeling that reason alone couldn't solve every problem. And finally, the increased geographic and social mobility of the era allowed ideas to spread quickly, galvanizing public action. Together, these forces sparked a powerful reform impulse. Many believed they could and should make the world better. From that reform spirit came bold experiments in living, utopian communities. Around 100 of these intentional societies sprang up in the years before the Civil War. Historians call them utopian communities, and while they varied in structure and motivation, most were rooted in deep religious conviction. Nearly all aimed to reorganize society around cooperation and shared values, in contrast to the growing individualism and materialism of mainstream America. These communities brought new political ideas into the national conversation, including the terms socialism and communism. Some of the most notable included the Shakers, who believed in the spiritual equality of the sexes. They lived celibate lives in gender segregated communities, emphasizing simplicity, hard work, and worship. And Oneida, founded by John Humphrey Noyes, the Oneidians rejected private property and traditional marriage, practicing what they called complex marriage, where every man was married to every woman. While most of these communities eventually dissolved, their ideas would echo far into the future. Of all the reform movements, none reached more Americans than the fight against alcohol, the Temperance Movement. Rooted in both religious revivalism and concerns over social decay, temperance reformers pointed to the nation's drinking habits as evidence of moral decline. And the numbers were shocking. In the 1820s, the average American consumed 5 gallons of hard liquor per year. That's more than twice the modern average. This led to broken families, lost wages, and widespread public disorder. In 1826, the American Temperance Union was founded, launching a full blown national crusade. Their methods were modern and effective: lectures, pamphlets, essay contests, and massive rallies urging people to sign the pledge and renounce demon rum. Women played a leading role, organizing and advocating in communities across the country. And the movement worked. By the 1840s, many states passed laws imposing heavy liquor taxes or allowing towns to ban alcohol entirely. Then in 1851, Maine passed the first statewide prohibition law, banning the manufacture and sale of alcohol. Other states would follow, especially in the West. Temperance had its critics, particularly from the working class men who resented moralizing reformers, but its success was undeniable. But if temperance reached more Americans, the abolitionist movement provoked the most passionate and divisive reactions. Calling for the end of slavery in a nation founded on liberty, abolitionists were both admired and attacked. The movement had relatively few followers compared to temperance, and it was often deeply divided. Should slavery be abolished gradually or immediately? One of the most famous voices for immediate abolition was William Lloyd Garrison, who began publishing The Liberator in 1831. In his first issue, he declared, "I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard." Garrison's views were radical, even burning copies of the Constitution at rallies, which he considered complicit in slavery. But Black Americans were speaking out long before white abolitionists gained attention. David Walker, born free, published Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World in 1829, a bold, passionate critique of American hypocrisy on freedom and democracy. And then there was Frederick Douglass, born into slavery in Maryland. After escaping, he became one of the most eloquent and powerful voices in American history. His 1845 Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass captivated readers. He insisted that freedom must mean more than emancipation. It must mean equality, politically, socially, and economically. Despite the courage of these voices, backlash was fierce. Mobs disrupted abolitionist meetings. In 1838, an anti slavery hall in Philadelphia was burned to the ground. One outspoken editor, Elijah Lovejoy, was murdered. Even Congress got involved. In 1836, Whigs and Democrats joined together to pass the infamous gag rule, forbidding discussion of abolitionist petitions in the House of Representatives. Though slavery would not end until the Civil War, abolitionists forced the issue into the national spotlight and laid the groundwork for the seismic changes to come. The fight against slavery would also spark another bold movement, the fight for women's rights. Women were heavily involved in both temperance and abolition, but in working for others' liberation, many began to question their own status in society. If all men were created equal, well, what about women? Two early voices were Sarah and Angela Grimke, sisters from South Carolina, who left their privileged lives to speak out against slavery and eventually against gender inequality. In 1840, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton traveled to London for the World's Anti Slavery Convention. To their shock, they weren't allowed to speak or vote, only to observe. That exclusion inspired them to plan a new convention. This one focused on women. The Seneca Falls Convention took place in July of 1848 in upstate New York. Around 300 people attended, including men, and by the end, 100 signed the Declaration of Sentiments, a document modeled after the Declaration of Independence. It outlined the injustices faced by women and demanded equal rights, including the right to vote. Momentum grew. In 1850, the first National Women's Rights Convention was held in Massachusetts, drawing more than 1,000 participants. Annual conventions followed for a decade. Sojourner Truth, a formerly enslaved black woman and famed abolitionist, added her voice to the cause, delivering her famous Ain't I a Woman speech at one such convention. While the movement saw few legal gains during the Age of Reform, interrupted as it was by the Civil War, it built an enduring foundation. Women like Susan B. Anthony joined the cause and would help lead the next generation. As historian Judith Wellman noted, the Seneca Falls Convention was the single most important factor in spreading news of the women's rights movement around the country in 1848 and into the future. The Age of Reform was a time of visionaries, struggle, and deep conviction. Whether it was temperance, abolition, women's rights, or utopian communities, Americans in the mid 1800s were unafraid to ask difficult questions and to demand change. Not every movement succeeded immediately, but together they pushed the nation closer to its ideals and reshaped the American conscience. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.